Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. DairyXnet and the National Association of County Agricultural Agents would like to present Economic Analysis Tools for Dairy Reproduction Programs with Dr. Victor Cabrera. Today, Dr. Cabrera will discuss three main decision support systems from the University of Wisconsin. Dr. Victor Cabrera is an assistant professor and extension specialist in dairy management at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Dairy Science Department. Dr. Cabrera combines applied research, interdisciplinary approaches, and participatory methods to deliver decision support tools for dairy farm management.
Hello everyone, thank you very much. Thanks Nancy and Jeannie who made this webinar possible. Thank you to DairyXnet and e-extension that make this format possible, and I'm able to share the work we are doing here in Wisconsin, and hopefully it can be available and it could be useful anywhere else. Okay, so today I want to spend some time talking about these specific reproduction tools. We spend quite some time with different groups of people developing these tools that we think are making a difference in the decision making on the reproduction side, in the reproduction management of dairy farms. Before giving you the specifics on each one of these tools, I would like to briefly talk to you about some of the rationale behind this. The first thing I would like to quickly mention is that the profitability of a herd will depend largely on the reproductive efficiency. And my guess is, if not all, most of the people attending would have that concept very clearly in their minds. If we talk with any practitioner, any dairy farmer, they will basically have that concept clearly in their minds. But the problem is, and it has been, that the relationship between profitability and reproductive efficiency is very complex. So we do need some decision support tools, as the ones we're going to see later today, to make a fair and a good assessment what's the economic change, what's the economic impact of changing reproductive efficiency. If we see the next points in this slide, hopefully we can understand better this idea. Reproductive performance can be measured, okay? And I'm pretty sure most of the people who are listening to this would not be unfamiliar to the 21-day pregnancy rate, for example. Some of the people would like to use other metrics of reproduction. Other people could use, for example, the percentage of cows who have been serviced at certain point in time, or the percentage of cows pregnant at certain point in time after calving, for example. We believe that 21-day preg rate, for example, is a more comprehensive metric. But the point is that we can measure that. Nowadays there are several software platforms and several ways in which basically every farm could have that 21-day preg rate measure. On the other side, the cost of reproductive programs, including synchronization, if any, if the farm is doing synchronization, the cost of hormones, or if the farm is doing purely estrus detection, for example, the cost of labor of detecting cows, as well as the cost of the breeding and everything else that is within the reproductive program can be calculated, can be estimated, and we can find out, for example, the cost per pregnancy, and many people, I think, use that as a metric as well. The point is, at the end in this slide, is even though we do have a good handling on the reproductive performance and also on the costs, I think there is still a challenge on measure the full economic impact, like, for example, profitability of reproductive programs. And hopefully after we end today with this webinar, we will have a better idea of how to measure that, and even more importantly, in my opinion, you would have specific, very objective tools that you could use to actually assess that profitability of different reproductive programs. Okay? So the first thing, and probably this is a tool that is available for a couple of years now, was to assess directly the whole profitability of reproduction. Okay? To make it clear, in this first tool, what we are doing basically is simulate the whole herd, okay, through probabilistic events. Like, for example, a cow that is in second month after calving, she will have certain probability of getting pregnant and certain probability of not getting pregnant. If she gets pregnant, there will be a probability later on, for example, of abortion. And if she is pregnant, or even if she is open, there will be always a probability of being culled for any other reason that is not reproductive, for example. So based on this tool, and we're going to see this in a little more detail later, we can assess what is the value for every 1 percentage point of 21-day break rate in the economics. It will simulate the whole herd under different reproductive efficiency levels, and it's going to give us a full value of those different reproductive program efficiencies. The next thing I would like to mention briefly now and later discuss more in detail is the evaluation of reproductive programs. Once we get a good idea of what we are going to have after improving our reproductive efficiency on the overall net return on the farm, maybe, and probably this has been a very heavily used tool, we can use this one that is called UW Dairy Repro Dollar Plus. What this tool actually does is analyze the specific reproductive programs. So in the previous case, we could see, for example, the value of 1 percentage point increase in the 21-day break rate. In this case, we go beyond that, because in this tool, as we're going to see in a moment, we can actually define very specific reproductive programs. We can combine synchronization with S2 detection, or we can do pure synchronization or pure heat detection programs. We can build those programs, but always within a specific farm system. So the analysis would be specific to a farm, because it will depend on the farm productivity, it will depend on the economics of the farm, it will depend on the facilities of the farm, and all those things can be and should be defined on this tool. So this is a more comprehensive and more farm-by-farm specific tool we're going to see in a moment. And the last tool we're going to discuss today is this one that we are calling the economic value of a dairy cow. Once we have done, if you remember quickly of what we have seen so far, the first tool will basically find out the value of 21-day break rate. The second tool will allow you to define reproductive programs and their impacts, specifically on the economics of the farm. In this last tool, which I think is also a very good resource you may want to keep in mind in this whole analysis, is the economic value of a dairy cow in order to do some individual cow management from the reproductive standpoint of view. Once we have defined and once we have optimized our best reproductive program, we believe, we are actually convinced that there is an opportunity to do a cow by cow, so in a much more detailed level, cow by cow reproductive decision making to even improve more the profitability of the reproduction on a dairy farm. Okay? So this is more as an introduction, but before we go further, I would like to give you the link where to find all these tools and many other tools, actually, I should mention. Okay, Very simple to remember, dairy MGT.info. You can Google dairy management in Wisconsin, and this should be the first hit that will appear in the web browser. So I would expect anyone would be able to get here very easily, very simple, regardless of where you are located. And inside this web page, besides other information, there is one section that's called Tools, Management Tools. And there are subsections within the Management Tools, and one of those subsections is called Reproduction, where you are going to find all these tools we're going to discuss today. I would like to take advantage of this slide also to advertise all the other tools that are available for you to use in this web page. So whenever you have a chance and you get to this web page, check out the tools that are available there and see if you find some practical application to those tools. And if you at some point require additional technical support, we will be glad to work with you on making those tools available and useful for your own situation. So they are in the reproduction section of the dairy management info under the tools section. Okay? So here is regarding the first tool that finds out the value of the 21-day preg rate. Okay? And I would like to take a moment to discuss the graph you can see on the left side of the slide. Okay? Basically, what we have there is the 21-day preg rate on the x-axis. I will try to point this. Right here, we are increasing the 21-day preg rate between 10 and 30%. Okay? And on the y-axis, on the vertical axis, we can see here dollars per cow per year as a net return on a farm. Okay? So, take-home messages on this graph. As we increase the 21-day preg rate, we will increase the net return on a per cow per year basis. Okay? You can see that there is an interaction between the price of milk. For example, this curve here is a $20 milk, $15 milk, and $10 per hundredweight milk. Okay? You can see that the change between 10% and 30% in the preg rate, it is higher with $20 milk than with $10 milk. But regardless of the price of milk, you can see one clear thing. As we increase the preg rate, we increase the net return. So there is no doubt about that. You can say, and it is correct to say, that this follows a diminishing marginal net returns. So that means that the gain of net return when we increase from 10 to 11%, for example, is much higher than when we increase between 29 and 30%. As we have higher pregnancy rate, our gain of improving even more our preg rate will be lower. But the point is, and very important point, is that even at 30%, which is a high preg rate, and actually I can tell you with great certainty, even at 40% preg rate, we will still have gains to make as we improve the preg rate. Bottom line, as we improve preg rate, we will always have a net return gain. Okay? How we calculate this? Using the tool I show you at the beginning that's called the economic analysis of pregnancy rate, which is available at the MGT.info markup. Okay? You have a link in the website as well. Let's see this result in a little more detail right here. Okay? So higher gains, as I mentioned before, are due to improve milk income over feed costs. Okay? But there are other important factors that will affect these gains. For example, savings in reproductive costs, return for additional calves, and savings in replacement costs. You can see here in this table the 21-day preg rate change. For example, here from 10 to 11%, and here at the end in the bottom of the table between 29 and 30%. What I mentioned before is that when you increase from 10 to 11%, for example, for let's say a representative farm for Wisconsin, we are gaining about $32 per cow per year for doing that improvement. If we improve between 29 and 30%, our gain would be not as high as $32, but $10, still a substantial improvement. The important thing also in this slide is that most of these gains will come, as we would expect, by the income over feed cost. When we get the cows pregnant earlier and we have a higher 21-day preg rate, we will take better advantage of the lactation curve shapes. We want to have the cows pregnant earlier and faster in order to take advantage and to produce on a per cow per day basis higher than others. That's reflected in what you can see here, higher income over feed cost as we increase the 21-day pregnancy rate. Okay? Next point. And I think that's, if anything, an important take-home message of this whole presentation is that everything that you are seeing here, it is completely full available for you to do your own analysis. So you will see at the end of each one of these tools a slide prompting you to do your own analysis. So simple. You go to the web page, Dairy Management in Wisconsin. You have the link. Then you look for this tool that is called Dairy Reproductive Economic Analysis. The tool is 100% online. So that means that you don't need to install any new program in your computer. You don't need to download anything. Everything should be readily available for you to work directly on the web, regardless of the web browser you are using. And then you do have the possibility, as you can see here, in all these tabs of the tool, to define as much as you would like and as much information as you would have to define farm-specific information. For example, you will be able to define milk production for your own farm situation, which I think is very important. I mentioned before that probably the most important factor on this gain in reproductive efficiency is because of milk productivity. We are making the cows to be more productive when we get the cows pregnant at the right time, faster after calving. Okay? And that will be reflected in milk production, but that will have, of course, as you could imagine, an important interaction with your own farm lactation curves. So that's why it's important that you define your own farm lactation curves, and you do have the opportunity to do that in this tool. You go to the section that's called milk, and you will be able to enter your own data, and the tool will use your own farm numbers. As well as milk production, you should and you could define culling rates, abortion rates, and all prices and costs that will happen in your own farm situation. And I think that's important to emphasize the fact that you would be able to do your own analysis with this tool under your own situation. As a note aside, very quickly, we do have, maybe some of you are aware of that in Wisconsin, an important extension program that's called Repro Money. The main objective of this program is to promote improved reproductive efficiency in dairy farms. And one important motivation to do that change has been actually using this tool on specific dairy farm systems. farmers are able to collect the information, or we help them to collect that information. We enter the data here, and then we can do the analysis on their own situation, and they can know pretty much how much they will be gaining as they make improvements in the reproductive efficiency. For example, in this last tab of the tool that's called Analyze, you are able to do a simple and very quick analysis that actually has been very popular in this repro money program, as I was mentioned. You can enter your own current repro program 21-day pregnancy rate, for example, let's say 15%, and then the goal you could or you should be able to achieve, for example, 20%. Let's be optimistic here. And then you can actually estimate and put at the beginning a rough number. How much do you think you are spending on a per cow per month basis with your current reproductive program, and how much more you would expect to spend in the new repro program? Maybe it would be the same. It's just a management change that would not cost additional anything additional, or there could be some additional costs here. Once you enter those, you can just hit this button here, and you will have right away an estimation how much you would expect to gain by doing those changes, which I think it's important as a first step on doing an important analysis like in this case. But after you do that, likely farms and farm practitioners would like to do a more fine-tuning analysis. And for that, we have another tool I have shown you already, but we're going to discuss more in detail right now. And this tool is called UW Dairy Repro Dollar Plus. Okay? And we did this with now my colleague in Cornell, Julio Giordano. And the main idea in this tool was to be able to actually represent very detailed reproductive programs as the ones we see in commercial dairy farms. What this program does, this is a spreadsheet. This is not a this is a standalone simulation that you need to download and work on your own computer, okay? Because of the level of detail and complexity that this tool requires. What it does, it simulates the reproductive performance along with the net returns. And the core of the tool is being represented in this figure on the right of this slide. Let me just discuss this briefly for you. On the x-axis, we have days open or days after calving, starting in 50 days here and going at 320 days and even a little more. And on the y-axis, the vertical axis here, we have the net return measured as $dollars per cow per day, which is the green curve here. The red, the blue circles curve here is actually the percent of pregnant cows. Some people may call this curve I'm showing right here the survival curve. It's the cumulative percentage of cows getting pregnant across time after the calving. Okay? And this is normal, and it will represent the reproductive efficiency of a specific reproductive program. Okay? Now the important thing and the different thing in this tool is that simultaneously we are calculating every time this green curve here, which actually represents the net return dollars per cow per day as we move along the days open. As we would expect, the later we go in the lactation, the lower would be the net return we would expect from that cow on getting pregnant. For example, in order to help in the understanding here, if we have a cow, for example, pregnant about here, let's say this is 120 days after calving. If this cow is pregnant at this point in time, we would expect about, let's say, $6.40 per day during that lactation for that cow. However, if the cow is pregnant, let's say very late at 230 days in lactation, we will expect from that cow only, let's say, $5.80 per day. If we multiply those differences for all days in a year and for all the cows on the herd, that makes actually a large amount of money that will be because of the reproductive efficiency. The nice thing of this tool is that this is being calculated for you internally. You don't need to worry about that. What you need to worry about is to enter your own information. Okay? The rationale behind this tool is that different herds with different repro programs could have the same performance, for example, as well as the same repro program used in different herds can have different outcomes. As you can see here on the right side, we do have, not only in Wisconsin, in the US and around the world, very different dairy farm reproductive systems. And each one will have their own challenges, their own strengths, their own weaknesses, and they will need to be assessed from the reproductive standpoint of view individually. And that's why we spend quite some time developing this tool that will allow to represent those farms and to represent the reproductive programs very specifically on those farms. And let me give you just here an example what you can do with this very nice tool. Okay? For example, analysis that you could perform very efficiently using the UW Dairy Repro $+ is, for example, include, exclude, or change the level of time artificial insemination or heat detection. Okay, so basically this is a question that happens frequently among farmers. Is, should I use more heat detection? Should I get rid of heat detection? Should I not do any time AI? There is like a new trend, for example, on doing more heat detection, for example. This tool, depending on your own conditions, on your own data, can give you good advice, good recommendation on what would be the best situation for your own farm. Other analysis we have done with this tool, and it is very efficient to do, is manipulate the interbreeding interval for those synchronization programs, for example. How much we will gain, for example, of trying to decrease 1 week our interbreeding interval, our repeats in the synchronization, the resynchronizations, for example. Other assessments we can use this tool for is start resynchronization before the pregnancy diagnosis. That will have a relationship with the interbreeding interval, because the main point of doing pregnancy diagnosis, of doing the resynchronization even before knowing what is the result of the previous breeding, will make us gain time and decrease the interbreeding interval. We recently also published a paper, this is February of this year, in analyzing the chemical pregnancy test, blood test to actually detect pregnant cows, how much value that would have on a commercial dairy farm. We can do that analysis very efficiently using the tool you are going to see in a moment, the UW Dairy Repro $+. Okay, we can also use, and this has been one of the latest additions or updates on this tool, using heat detection devices, which are becoming, as you may know, very popular lately. What is the value of introducing those on our reproductive programs, for example? Okay, so here you have a screenshot of how the tool actually looks like. And this is only one part of the tool. Here we are seeing only on the right side the results page of the UW Repro $+. Okay, For example, in this case, it is showing us that increasing the percentage of cows bred in estrus from 50 to 70% should be here, actually, increase the 21-day preg rate by 2%, and importantly, would translate in this case, for example, in $22,000 a year of additional profit in a $1,000 cow herd. You need to understand in this case that in this analysis, we introduce the heat detection devices, for example, and we use some data that has been published to assess that we would have some gain in the additional estrus detection. But as you may know also, the introduction of these new devices, this new technology would have a cost, and all those costs have been included into the analysis. And doing a full analysis, we are still having a profitability if we do that, if our assumptions are correct, and for this specific case. We need to highlight the fact that this is a specific farm-by-farm analysis, and it should work on that way. How about heat detection between synchronizations? Okay, this is also something that has been done with the tool that you are available, that is available for you, and you can actually do some analysis like this if you would like to do. Okay, in this case we use a farm in Wisconsin, and in this case the question was, everything started with a question of farmers saying what happened if we introduce heat detection or estrus detection in between synchronizations. For example, in this graph on the top left side here, we can see two potential reproductive programs. Actually, the baseline in this case is the red circle curve here, okay, in which it was 100% time AI, pure synchronization, the first breeding at 82 days with a very high conception rate of 45%. Actually, this was a double off-sync for those of you who are familiar with this. And then after that, there were resynchronization with off-sync with a 30% conception rate every 42 days. Okay? So the question was, what if we cherry picking? Cherry picking means if I do breed cows to heat detection in between the synchronizations, even before the first time AI and after the first time AI, okay? And the answer was not a straight one. It is very interesting to see here because actually we found out that introducing the heat detection before and after the time AI, there was no gain, no loss. A little difference here and there, but not much gain, neither loss, okay? But we did found that using the cherry picking before time AI will give us a loss, as you can see here. If we assume that the estrus detection is 30%, okay, we will have a negative value, meaning here that I'm better off not doing cherry picking before the first time AI. And this makes sense because our cherry picking will have 30% conception rate compared with a 45% conception rate with our first time AI, which is very large, even though we will need to wait quite some time to get that first time AI. But also the important thing to understand here, and the tool actually very nicely handles, is the fact that those cows that are bred here to heat detection will not be available for the time AI, or at least to the first time AI. So we will lose that opportunity of 45% conception rate until the next synchronization, which only would have 30% conception rate. If we do actually, and that's the other interesting thing of this research, which is also published, is the fact that if we do after the first time AI, the cherry picking, we will gain. Okay, so, and it does make sense because we do have the off-sync after first time AI with 30% conception rate and 42 days of interbreeding interval. If we do cherry picking, we are gaining time at the same conception rate, and that means at the end that translates in additional money we can make by doing this. Okay? So we have seen also in the very latest research we have done, the intervening interval will make us a huge amount of money by decreasing our intervening interval, as you can see here. For example, this curve, as you can see down here, is 28 days of intervening interval. Maybe it's not available nowadays, but probably sometime soon. And here you can see here intervening interval of 56 days. Okay, as we decrease the intervening interval, we can see the quantitative value of doing that. Okay, between $40 and $60 additional profit for every week shorter intervening interval. Okay, so but in order to reach those shorter intervening interval, we can do earlier chemical pregnancy tests, and we tested this in this research that has been recently published. Very briefly, I'm not going to go in all the details here. You can see this at your own time. But what I want to mention, the final conclusion of the research was that having a sensitivity and a specificity of about 94% of the test, and that pretty much we can say an accuracy of the test, of the pregnancy test, the chemical or blood test of 94%, it would be worthwhile to use it in order to decrease the intervening interval, and that will make money if that's available on the market to decrease 1 week of intervening interval. Okay, you can do this on your own situation using the tool, which I think is a nice thing. You can make your own analysis. You will need to define all these values that you can see here in yellow, and after just hitting a button, you will have the results right away. Important thing I want to highlight here is the fact that you can define very detailed reproductive programs, including several options of synchronization programs, and also you can combine those with heat detection, or you can do only heat detection programs. Once you define all your lactation curves and all your economics and specifics of the reproductive programs, you will do your analysis, and you can actually find out which are your best options to improve reproductive efficiency. So the nice thing is that available for you. I'm going to finish up this presentation with the last two very briefly, in which we can do this analysis on an individual cow. We want to do decision making for every single cow, even after we have defined our best reproductive program, as we have seen before. And the rationale behind this is that every cow is different. They have different contributions to the whole herd economics. So based on that, we should and we could do individual cow management. We can fine-tune our reproductive management. For example, we could do, if we have a highly valuable cow, maybe we can do sex semen on that cow. If we have a very low valuable cow, maybe we don't want to breed too many times that cow. Those kind of things are available and should be considered as well. Okay? But how we do that? We do this by having very clear the concept of the value of a cow. Okay? Up to now, there have been research-based analysis that gave us some indications of the value of the cow and how that changed across time. But I think very recently only there is this new tool, and has been published last year actually, that is called the economic value of a dairy cow. It's also available. It's completely online tool and very easy and very simple to use for you. Okay, and let me give you what this tool actually does. It calculates the value of a cow. How this calculation is done. Basically, what we are doing is projecting what this cow will make us in money, net return, from today to the future. And we always compare that projection with the projection of a potential replacement. So we are always comparing a cow with her potential replacement. If this value happens to be positive, as in this case, $328, for example, for a second lactation cow 10 months after calving 4 months pregnant, if this is positive, I'm much better off keeping this cow rather than replacing her. If this value becomes negative, and it will become negative at some point, that means I'm better off replacing this animal. So that's a critical, crucial, important value that we want to keep in mind, and nowadays we can easily calculate for every single cow on our herd. As I said before, positive, we keep the cow. Negative, we are better off replacing the cow for a fresh heifer, okay? But also, if it is positive, and depending on the quantitative value of this positive number, we can do economic decision making regarding reproductive management. We can do better reproductive management, and I'm going to give you only some ideas of those managements. It would be up to the farmer to decide, to the farmer and practitioner and advisor to decide which are those best decision making on a farm by farm basis, on a cow by cow basis in this case. Just to give you an idea how the cow value changes, you can see here in this curve that it decreases consistently as the months after calving move in a cow. So if the cow is not getting pregnant, her value starts decreasing. At some point it becomes negative, and I'm better off replacing this cow, which normally is done on the farm. Here we have the quantitative value that's going to tell us exactly when we should replace this cow. If the cow gets pregnant, you can see in these curves here, pregnant at 3 months in milk, 5 or 7 months in milk, you can see always this value will be much higher than the open cow. So that's a first important point. Always higher value if we get the cows pregnant. It makes complete sense, okay? But here we are using in this graph an average cow. And we all know there is no average cow on a herd, okay? Every cow is different. So that's why in this analysis we need to have an indication what's the level of productivity of a cow in relationship with the other cows on a herd. And you can see how much of a difference it will make. For example, if we have a second lactation cow open, this is 20% more production on this cow. How much more is than the average cow? And if it is 20% less production than the average, you can see how lower would be her value. Actually, in this case, even if it is 2 months after calving, her value becomes negative, and maybe I don't want to breed this cow. I want to replace even before breeding this cow and bring a new replacement which will make more value on the herd. So I can do effectively reproductive management on different cows. Look at here, even if the cow is pregnant, 2 months pregnant, 10 months lactating, if the cow has very low production ability, like we are seeing in this curve, I may be better off replacing this cow even if she's pregnant. Okay? So we need to take into consideration this, and we can do these calculations on our own and for our own conditions. Here are only some ideas. I believe this is my last slide. And so I just want to share with you some of the ideas I would have. You may have different ideas. Farmers and practitioners would have different ideas, but this is only to stimulate the thinking on this area of decision making. For example, if we have very high cow value and the cow is in 3rd month in milk, so very early in lactation, is peaking in the lactation maybe, around there, and she's not pregnant, I may decide, for example, better quality semen or female sex semen for this cow because it's very high value. What if I have, for example, a very low, like in this case, cow value, 4 months in milk, even if she's pregnant, I may be considering replacing if the value of this cow is negative. Okay, I can do things like sex semen, I can do like in vitro fertilization, for example, for some of the cows, depending on the value. I can consider shortened voluntary waiting period, or earlier, for example, do not breed labeling to the cows, for example, based on this cow value. I think there is an important tool here that you could use to further improve reproductive efficiency on a cow-by-cow basis. Here is the tool. And actually, this is my last slide, in which I just want to highlight that it is very simple to use. The yellow cells that you can see here on the left side of the tool are the only ones you need to define in order to do a good assessment of the cow value. Of course, you need to define in what stage the cow is, what lactation, months in the milk, or days after calving, and if she's pregnant, and what month in pregnancy, for example, or how many days in pregnancy. Another important thing I want to highlight is that you need to make an assessment of what's the level of productivity of this cow compared with the other cows on the herd. And also, if possible, have an idea what would be the genetic improvement with the replacement would be also important. There are other factors that should be pretty straightforward in any dairy farm system that you would need to define here, but very simple. Actually, when you go to the tool, you will have good indication what to enter in each one of these cells. And once you just hit this button here that says Analyze, you will have right away, as you can see here, the value of the cow. If you want more detail, actually you would have all the components of this value of the cow to get a better idea what's going on or having that cow value for that specific animal. The last thing and very important thing I want to mention is this is for a single cow. As you can see here, you have the option actually to do an analysis for all the cows on the herd, which makes a lot of sense because you're going to do analysis and decision making for all the cows on the herd. So in this tab, when you go there, you will be able to enter actually all your records of all your cows, IDs of all your cows on the herd, and it will return to you the value for each one of those cows on your herd. And based on that, hopefully, you will be able to do better decision making in the reproduction management of your herd. I just want to end with a very brief acknowledgement of the different sources of funding to do all this work. And my last slide, just a nice picture of Wisconsin landscape. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I would be open and I would try to answer your questions and comments.
Thank you, Victor. I do have a question for you. I know a large part of your presentation was focused on individual cow analyses and decision making. Do you think that there is a difference between the value of individual cow decisions for small farms versus large farms?
Well, that's a good question actually, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to expand on that area. Simple answer would be no. I think both would have an opportunity to use the single cow value to do their own analysis. Now, maybe the difference would be on how they would use. Okay, it is likely that small farms would have better handle on the individual cows because in certain way they do more personalized management on their cows. From that point of view, I would say that in the large farms where you are in need of relying much more on the records, this cow value would be more critical because it will give you something that likely you would not be able to observe on cows because there is not such a level of management at the farm level. Would that answer your question?
It does, thank you. And on a more technical note, You mentioned that several of the tools available are entirely online. Do those tools require a high-speed internet connection, or will a lower speed connection also work with those?
Well, again, thanks for the question. Any internet speed connection will work with them. There is no limitation on that sense. As always, a higher speed will make a little easier, but I should mention this. In the tools, the first tool and the last tool, which are completely online, well, all the tools are online, but the UW Repro Plus, it is standalone and you will need to download, okay? So the download, of course, will be faster if you have a higher speed internet, but even with dial-up would be available without no problem. And we have seen people using that way. For the other two tools that are completely online, actually, it's very interesting because the way we design those is all the calculations are performed in the remote server. So it doesn't rely in the computer speed internet. So once you hit the button, the calculations are performed in our servers. And then the only thing you need to wait for is to upload back the results. So in certain way, what I'm saying is, for those tools that are completely online, other than loading the page, the speed will not be different whether you have high speed or low speed internet.
Are there any other tools available in specific from Wisconsin that you would recommend?
Yes, we do have several sections. The reproduction side has been heavily used for sure, but also the nutritional side. We do have several tools that are being very popular actually. The only thing I will request for those of you who go to the web, the only thing we will request in order for you to, the first time you go to see the tools, is to put an email. Okay, because we keep an email list just to keep up and to know what are the tools that are more used. So I can know, for example, because of that, on the nutritional side and the nutrition and feeding, there are two tools that lately have been very popular. One of those is called Feedball, and basically what it does, it calculates the true value of feeds according to market evaluated feeds. It's very simple to use, and basically it gives you a good idea what to buy or what to sell, or what would be the right price to sell or to buy feeds. It's called Feedball. And the other thing that also has been very popular on the nutritional side is the group feeding. And in this case, the tool, what it does, it shows you what would be the gain, the net return gain when you do grouping compare and not grouping, or when you do more grouping, even though if you are doing some grouping, nutritional grouping I'm talking here. So it gives you a more quantitative value of doing nutritional grouping.
That sounds very useful. I would like to thank you, Victor, for presenting for us, and thank you to everyone who attended today.